Does Notre Dame's additions from the transfer portal propel the Irish into a national title contender?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast a part of your day each and every day, right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. We're going to be discussing the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the portal additions they have, and from a little bit of a different perspective than the last time I talked about them. They have 8 players coming in, but more importantly, did they bring in the right guys specifically for this season? Now, they changed up a few things in terms of how they've done their offseason. They only took 8 portal guys, number one. And number two, they went after some guys that didn't necessarily have a ton of experience, but have a lot of upside. Is that the right approach? Is there a better way they could do it? We're going to be looking at some of those things. I'm going to go through each of the 8 players in particular, but the most important note here, they needed a little more explosiveness, in my opinion. And to that end, Notre Dame is one of the programs that they were already with a good roster, but should they have taken players instead of like Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham, are both talented, very, very talented. Porter was a 5-star and Graham a borderline 5-star recruit, both from Ohio State at the wide receiver position. Should they have went after more, not just talented players, I don't know if you're going to get more pure talent, but more proven? And there was a few guys on defense, it was the opposite. Notre Dame took Francis Brewu, very proven, 2 years at Pittsburgh, played a lot. So what's the difference in that? Going to be talking about a few of those things throughout the show. And I want to ask everybody, in general, no matter if you like Notre Dame, if you hate Notre Dame, do you think they are a 2026 national title contender? Why or why not? I think they are, personally. But at the same time, I don't think it's a lock. A few of these guys have to hit that I simply don't know about. So with that, I'm going to go through the players. I'm going to start on offense. And again, Mylan Graham, Quincy Porter. Those are the 2 I'm most interested in. I'm going to read off some stats that I have pulled up from PFF and just their season in general. But Mylan Graham, he has played at 2 years at Ohio State. He redshirted 1 year, so he got 3 years left. 6'1", 190 pounds. He can really run. He's a guy that could probably play safety, probably play running back, whatever. He's very athletically gifted. He played in 12 of the 13 games that he was available for Ohio State last year. Only had 6 catches for 93 yards, 15.5 yards per catch, and 1 drop. So only 6 catches, only a catch every other game, basically, that he played in. Okay. Quincy Porter, he's a redshirt freshman. He played a little bit, but like Graham, didn't really produce a lot. He played in like 4 games. 6'4", 210. This is a boundary receiver if you want him to be. He could play flanker. He could play out to the wide side. But at 6'4", 210, he probably is your Malachi Fields replacement. At least that's the thought. He'll compete for that spot. They have other guys there too. Notre Dame's got more receiver talent than some people think. But again, it's not that proven. So last year, 4 catches, 59 yards, 14.8 per reception. He was a 5-star out of Bergen Catholic. I ask again, should they have taken another receiver that is quote unquote proven at the college level? And the reason I ask that is there's debate about it in general, but Indiana, they won the national title predominantly taking players, not all, but predominantly guys that had been proven, even if it was the MAC level, FCS, whatever it may be, a lot of G6 guys that were not highly recruited. But once they got to college, for whatever reason, it worked out. They end up at Indiana. Some, of course, came over with the James Madison group in 2024 and were holdovers in 25. But they went with productivity across the board. They were looking at their list a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say just a couple of guys that weren't really productive that they knew. And that's probably guys that, if I remember right, they were James Madison. They knew them. But anyway, the point is still the same. It's been shown that a lot of guys work out better when they're proven. And to that end, Florida State in 2024, they kind of took this route with a couple of the elite kids that hadn't worked out at Georgia and Bama. In that 2014 for Florida State obviously tanked. They won 2 games. So there's some different ways to look at this, but Notre Dame did a mix of that because while Porter and Graham don't have a lot of productivity, they did go and get plenty of productivity on the other side of the ball. By the way, those are the only two players Notre Dame took on offense. No quarterback, no running back, no tight end, and no offensive line. Notre Dame's offensive line is so loaded. They had guys that had multiple years of eligibility left pretty much across the board, and a couple had one left, and they both left, and Notre Dame still didn't take anybody in the portal. That's how well Notre Dame's recruited on the offensive line. So congrats to them. They took Keon Keeley, a former five-star. Some had him as the number one player in the country coming out of high school, out of Tampa, Florida. He ends up at Alabama for 3 years. He's transferred over at 280. I think he needs to lose a little weight. He's going to play strong side end kind of a role. Alabama had him in coverage part of the time. I don't know why. He played in 12 or 14 games, 167 snaps, 9 pressures, 3 sacks, and 5 different stops. He's a guy that has all the talent in the world, but for whatever reason, the light hasn't gone on completely, in my opinion. And he's somebody that, quite frankly, if he doesn't figure out the weight, I think he's a little too heavy to play a Notre Dame scheme with that. I'm sure they'll drop him down. It'll be interesting, but here are his grades for Pro Football Focus. 64.1 defense, run defense 66.5, tackling 74.8, pass rush 54.5, and coverage 75.7. I'm a little surprised by that. But if he wants to improve that pass rush, he needs to drop a little weight. When I knew Keon in high school, he played at Berkeley Prep. Dominic Sayo is coach out there, great guy. 54.5 pass rush should be in the 70s for him. This is a very freaky athlete. He's 6'5" or so, maybe 6'6", whatever he is. He should be higher, but they needed another guy just to add into the mix because Boubacar Traore is a really good pass rusher. Bryce Young's going to be good, but you need to rotate, especially once you get to the playoffs. And on the interior, Francis Brewu from Pittsburgh, 6'2", 280. He's got 2 years left. Started 12 or 13 games, 484 snaps, 20 pressures, a couple of sacks, 18 stops, PFF 74.8. Overall, run defense 77, tackling 59, pass rush 74. That's the guy I'm really curious about for Notre Dame on defense. Again, this is the opposite of offense. Mylan Graham hasn't played a ton. Quincy Porter hasn't played a ton. Brew is the polar opposite. He played immediately for Pittsburgh in 24, played a lot in 25. Keon Keeley played some this past year, redshirted his freshman year at Oregon, but he's a nose guard. He's a specialty player, 6'6", 336. He started 3 of 13 games, 232 snaps, had a pressure, 12 tackles, 6 stops. PFF defense 65.7, run defense 69.3, tackling 58.3, and pass rush 60.9. He's 330 plus pounds. He's 6'6". He is a specific body type, so experience or not, he's got some. I get why Notre Dame took him. And then the other two are very experienced, especially considering McKinney, the corner from Colorado. He comes over after 597 snaps, played 9 games and started all 9 last year. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. He'll be in that mix to start at one of the corner spots for Notre Dame. He had a pick last year. I think he's a pretty good player. 66 defense, run defense 72, tackling 54, coverage 64. This is a guy with the talent they have around him at Notre Dame. Like, their secondary is loaded. That's a good addition. But the other guy I'm even more intrigued with because he's got 3 years left. He only started 2 games at Michigan last year, but as a true freshman is Jayden Sanders, 6 foot 200. That's a strong kid. He's an East Texas kid. I love that area. 27 tackles, 5 stops last year. Allowed 15 to 21 completions, but only 8.5 yards per attempt and gave up 1 score. PFF 75.2, run defense 68.6, tackling 70.7, and coverage 75. Again, they're in a great spot. You talk about Notre Dame's defensive secondary. So adding 2 more, the rich get richer there. But the most interesting in a lot of ways, this you'll probably never hear me say this again for Notre Dame, is Spencer Porath, the Purdue kicker. He kicked 3 field goals against Notre Dame last year, by the way. He made 15 to 17, 4 out of 5 from 40 or beyond, and 2 out of 3 from 50 and beyond. That's pretty good. Notre Dame's kicking game was abysmal this past year, though. They, against Boston College, for those who don't remember or don't know, they missed 3 extra points. That's pretty bad. To say the least, that's pathetic. So when we come back, I'm going to go through, I'm going to ask some questions. If you want to get into the chat, fire away. If you're listening to this later on YouTube or whatever, comment down below. But when we come back, I'm going to have some questions for you. I'm going to answer some of my own and why I think in some ways Notre Dame did really well in the portal and other things they might have done. That is next right here on the Portal Podcast.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Dawn Staley and South Carolina remain on top of the SEC standings after handing Tennessee their worst defeat in program history with a final score of 93-40. In the 43-point win, South Carolina shot 69% from the field. Tessa Johnson had a perfect shooting night, scoring 24 points, shooting 4 for 4 from the floor, including 2 threes, and made all 4 of her free throws. And UCLA remains undefeated in Big Ten play, topping Michigan 69-66 as Player of the Year contender Lauren Betts put up a double-double, scoring 16 points, collecting 16 rebounds, and adding 5 assists and 3 blocks. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast a part of your day, each and every day, right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. If you have not already, check out the Everydayer Club down below. It will give you a description of everything that's going on. But most importantly, if you want your audio feed to have no ads, $5 a month or $50 a year, check out the Everydayer Club. Let's discuss what's going on with Notre Dame from a holistic perspective here with the portal. I think that the wide receiver impact will be met pretty quickly. We'll know in spring ball. They got CJ Carr. Notre Dame was number 2 in the nation yards per attempt when CJ was behind center. He averaged 9.4 yards per attempt, if I remember correctly. And Drew Metzger is the only guy ahead. He had like 9.5, the guy from North Texas that transferred to Oak State. So they could throw it around, but they also had the advantage of teams knowing they had to try to stop Ja'Jarian Price and, of course, Jeremiah Love. They're not going to be the same at running back. They've got elite players back there, but that's as good a 1-2 as we've seen in college football the last several years. That being stated, if you've got speed and size on the perimeter, it does put teams in flux. So while I understand that Notre Dame went with some inexperienced guys, I understand the theory. I give that a B+. Like, I still would have liked one more guy, maybe as a proven player. Doesn't have to be a dominant guy, but that's just me. And the 2 guys they got were elite talents. They're kind of rolling with it, and they've got some other young guys. I'm not going to dive into Notre Dame's receiver depth chart. Check out Locked On Irish if you want to do that. A great show, by the way. I was watching some of it yesterday. But I also think that Notre Dame at receiver is going to be a little bit underrated. Faison, Greathouse, those are 2 proven commodities. You got the 2 guys that are coming in. They have some other young players. They'll be in a pretty good spot. So, yes, they will have plenty of offensive firepower. And they've got Aeneas Williams at running back, among others. They have plenty there. My one question, and they could still technically add here, did they bypass on tight end, and should they have not done that? Because they've just had very bad luck. Notre Dame's tight end room has been banged up beyond belief the last couple of years. It's insane. Let's see who's healthy and whatnot, but they need to figure out tight end because it wasn't productive beyond their starter this past year, went to the NFL. They need to figure that out. And if they do, that'll help their run game, because that was the one area, like, it's so weird. You had 2 elite running backs, and they were pretty average in short yardage, to put it mildly. Part of that's on the O-line. Part of it is they were trying to use like receivers on the edge to block linebackers. That's just not going to work. Tight end needs to be better. Hopefully for them, they have a little more productivity based on just guys being healthy. Now, pass rush. Boubacar Traore is a stud. Bryce Young could be. He wasn't as good this past year as I thought. Well, I wouldn't say underwhelming because he's such a freak, but he wasn't as productive as I thought he would. I think he got a little bit bigger than maybe he should have. He's dropped a little weight, and he's 6'7", like 260 something. We'll see how that goes in spring and then into the fall, or summer then fall, but that's just 2 of them. I brought up Keon Keeley a little bit ago. I think that's a really interesting piece because you need to be able to rotate guys, keep players from gobbling up a ton of snaps in your first 5-6 games. They need to be as healthy as possible for when they play SMU, when they play Miami. I think those are the 2 best teams probably on their schedule. I don't have it in front of me. I'm probably missing somebody, but their schedule's pretty weak. Some of the teams that they thought were going to be good when they scheduled them 10 years ago, like Michigan State, Wisconsin, we don't really know. I mean, Michigan State's doing a complete reboot. Wisconsin should be better. They've spent some money. They've got a very mobile quarterback who ran for 179 yards against Indiana last year. He's pretty talented, but I don't think either one of those teams are going to beat Notre Dame. If they can use guys like Keon and he develops and earns it, maybe he takes Bryce Young's spot. I don't know. But at the worst, you're going to have a good rotational guy. He played just under 200 snaps for the Irish this past year, or for Alabama, excuse me. So Keon playing just under 200, that's a loaded edge room at Bama. Like, they have a ton of guys. I think there's a chance that he's a 250 snap guy for Notre Dame this year, and they balance it out. Between him and Young, if you get 500 snaps to 600 snaps, somewhere in that range, maybe somebody else plays. I don't know. But you should be in a pretty good spot. On the other side, Boubacar will get the lion's share of snaps, and they might move him around to each side. I don't know. But that's probably your best pass rusher by a pretty good margin. And then again, Brew at nose guard on some plays, at 3 tech on others. They're going to do some different things. Notre Dame runs a 3-man front sometimes a 4-man. They're going to be complex, I'm sure. I'm curious to see what they do with him. And then Keon Gray is pretty straightforward. That's 330-some pounds. He's 6'5 plus, 6'6", whatever it may be. He's a nose guard. If you do not double team guys like that, your run game usually suffers, and under no circumstance can a man that size hit your quarterback square. You don't want to double guys like that, but you risk your quarterback getting completely crushed if you don't. He opens up things when he doesn't even make a play. So I understand why they took him. Those are really about as polar opposite interior D lineman as you could take. So is the pass rush going to be better by adding these pieces? I don't see how it couldn't be. I don't know if there's ever an A+ in D-line unless you do what Tech did and just completely overspend. Texas Tech took 7 guys again this year. I will give Notre Dame an A- just because they don't have as much volume as like Tech. But for the 3 guys they have added, Keon Keeley, Keon Gray, Francis Brewu, like those are 3 really good players that all have distinct roles that should help Notre Dame. And it's already a good defense, but they'll have more depth. They'll have more size. They'll be able to do different things with their run gap bits because, again, especially when Gray's in the game, you got to double team him or chip him or something. You cannot have him getting into the backfield because he's going to be in the A gap a lot. It's going to put a lot of pressure on teams to try to block at least one, if not both of the edges for the Irish on any given play, one-on-one. That's hard. Now, the secondary is where there's a lot of debate. And I don't want to say I have a different opinion because I want to remain as open as I can, but I'm pretty intrigued here. I know he was only a freshman, and I don't like really going at it and looking at guys and saying, you know what? I think it's going to work out well, and he's going to beat out an older guy, but it's just really rare that a Michigan team starts a freshman at corner for any reason. He started a couple games this last year and only allowed 8.5 yards per reception. His defensive grade was 75.2 on PFF. His coverage grade was 75. And again, I am completely biased here. East Texas kids, I believe he's Kilgore. That's one of the best programs in East Texas historically. He's from an area where it matters. Like, it is life and death. I think Jayden Sanders has a chance to surprise some people. And even if he's not a quote-unquote starter, maybe he's the nickel that competes with Dallas Gold. I don't know where they're going to play him. That guy's the intriguing piece in the secondary. DJ McKinney, he'll start some games in some capacity, 6'2", 180, but he gave up 14.1 yards per reception. That's not ideal, but he played at Colorado. So how do I grade that? Because they were just bad. I think that the coaching and the scheme and having more talent around him, McKinney's numbers will get better just by osmosis. But I'm not sure where he's going to play. Is he the field corner? Do they play him at nickel? There's all kinds of rumors about what Notre Dame's going to do. And I'm just going to leave it at this. At worst, Notre Dame increased their depth, which was part of their goal. They've talked about that a little bit. And Marcus Freeman also discussed, hey, we needed to improve. We lost some guys. The numbers got to be right. But we wanted to get guys that could really make plays. And they got 2 starters, guys that had started games at P4 level. That's pretty important. Finally here with Porath, you can't even put in perspective how bad Notre Dame was at kicking the ball. Like, they were worse than some high school teams, literally. this past year. It just injury to one guy. The other guys weren't very good. It was just a disaster. Kicking is one of those things that's so mental. I'm not going to try and say I understand the technique. I've never even tried to learn it, but they were abysmal. They're going to get better. Porath will be the most important guy in terms of upgrade from what they were last year to this year. It's impossible not to be. It's like the biggest joke in the world, like how bad they were. Again, they missed 3 extra points against Boston College. 3. Not field goals, extra points. This kid made, ironically, 3 field goals against Notre Dame for Purdue last year in Notre Dame Stadium. That obviously makes it pretty obvious that he's a valuable addition. So all of that together, does Notre Dame have the number 1 secondary this next year? Quite possibly. Schuler, they're going to have McKinney, they're going to have Sanders, obviously Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, who, by the way, went back to number 29. That's interesting. I really like the kids they had as freshmen last year. I'm a big Dallas Golden guy. I knew him. He played with Keon at Berkeley Prep in Tampa, for those who don't know. That's how I know Dallas. But they've got tons of players. I don't know who's going to be at Tay Johnson, who's going to be a better secondary, but adding those 2 guys with that pass rush, I think especially for the playoffs, this is something that I look at differently. Playoff football is different at the pro and college level because almost every team has a quarterback that on 3rd and 7 you still fear. Quarterback's the most important position in the sport by a mile, and it's not changing anytime soon. It's only increasing. Notre Dame will have a better pass rush with 4 this year. That is my prediction. I've been thinking about this for quite a while. I think Notre Dame will be able to hammer some teams with their ability to get home with blitzes against some of the weaker teams. But if you're going to be, I'm just throwing out random names here, a Texas, an Oregon, an Ohio State, a Texas A&M, a Miami, whoever it is in the playoff, forget the regular season. If you're going to beat any of those teams in the playoff, you need to be able to blitzkrieg somebody in a different way. And that's just rushing 4. Miami, to me, was one of about 2 or 3 teams that was any good at it last year. A&M at certain times, Cassius Howell. I don't know if Notre Dame is going to be on that level, but if they're just right below on the edges as pass rushers, especially by adding Keon Keeley, they've really done some good things. When we come back, I'm going to talk about some of the questions in the chat. We're going to talk about what's going on nationally. Who will Notre Dame most likely compete with for top seeds in the next playoff? That is next right here on the Portal Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert from the beginning to the end without the stress or the guesswork that is involved. So, did you get all the right forms for 1099? Did you make sure you got all the deductions that are possible? And how much time are you wasting if you try to do your taxes yourself or you hand it off to somebody that you don't trust? That's where TurboTax comes in. For a limited time, you can also have your taxes done by an expert for $150 all in. If you didn't have a TurboTax expert file your taxes this past year, just file by the 28th of February to qualify. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment with TurboTax today. All right, now let's discuss Big Box. Is Notre Dame a title contender? Yes. In my extremely early preliminary rankings, I've got Notre Dame number 2 up for the record. I've got Ohio State number 1. Really means nothing. We need to see who stays healthy through spring, summer, and fall, and all that stuff. But that gives you an idea what I think of their roster. My biggest questions are tight end. Will they be healthy? They've got to run the ball better on the edges. I mean, for the love of mankind, you had Price and Love, and you struggled much of last year running the ball in short yardage. That doesn't make much sense. But again, they had receivers sometimes trying to block on the edge. That's how many tight ends they had out. It was insane. Secondarily, pass rush. We just went over that. Can you or can you not? This is a straight up checkbox. Consistently against the better teams on your schedule, rush 4 and get home. If the answer is no, your chances of winning a title are diminished just so much, it's not even fun. You can only blitz so much. And Notre Dame's blitz package is tremendous. But against the elite quarterbacks, especially ones that are experienced, like if they play in the playoff, Arch will have been through enough by that point at Texas. Obviously, Ohio State, Miami, maybe LSU at Sam Webb. Like all these teams have veteran quarterbacks that you're probably going to play. So to that end, here are the 6 or 7 teams that I think are pretty much locks for the playoff. Texas Tech, and their schedule is maybe even easier than Notre Dame. Like it is, they don't play in Miami or anybody. It's the easiest schedule in major college football. They're going to be in, at worst, they're 11-1. I don't know if there will be a second team in the Big 12, but it's possible. But right now, I've got Tech as that one team for sure. Notre Dame, obviously, I already talked about them. Ohio State, I already talked about them. Those are 3. I think Miami, their schedule is not super difficult. Even if they lose to Notre Dame, that might be the only loss they have. They'll be favored in every other game, and they'll only be like a 2 to 4 point underdog at Notre Dame is my guess. Looking at across college football, in addition, Georgia, till otherwise proven, I'm going to pick Georgia to go to the playoff every year. I'm not picking anything with the Trinidad Chambliss thing until I see the paperwork signed one way or the other. If Trinidad's back, Ole Miss is in. If Trinidad is not back, I'm going the other direction. I know there was a trial this morning when I did this, but I have not seen the results. And I don't know if it's done even at this point, regardless, whatever. I'm not touching that. Beyond that, the one that I'm really curious about, because they took 40 transfers, would be LSU. Again, they got Sam Leavitt. That's great. They got Jordan Seaton. In my opinion, the best overall player in the portal was Jordan Seaton. He came from Colorado, the left tackle, to go to LSU. I could see Notre Dame playing against him and that crew in the playoff. But 40 guys is a lot of portal players. How are they going to mesh? I don't know. My dark horse, ironically, to make the playoff that I don't think that many people are going to discuss is USC. They don't play Notre Dame. Obviously, that's been discussed a million times. And they have a much better roster in the trenches because a lot of the key guys are back. They added a few guys on both sides of the ball. We'll see if Lincoln Riley and crew can get that done. It wouldn't shock me if they were 8-4 still. It's Lincoln Riley. But if not this year, coming up, then when's it going to be? I'm picking USC at 10-2. I'm higher on them than most. And for those that know me, I'm obviously not a USC fan, but I'm definitely not a Lincoln Riley fan. But at the same time, hey, man, got a 5th-year senior quarterback. If you can't make it this year, well, it's, what are we doing? The only other dark horses I want to talk about aren't going to really shock anybody. SMU went to the playoff a couple of years ago. They're probably the second best team in the ACC. So that's certainly there. Oregon, I don't really consider them a dark horse. They should be in. They'll be 10-2 or better. I think this is going to be a pretty straightforward year. I think last year was an aberration. I don't think Clemson's on that level anymore. They've got a new quarterback. They don't even know who their quarterback's certainly going to be. In the SEC, there's always the chance for some other teams like Oklahoma, possible. Their schedule's difficult, but graduate student at quarterback, knows the scheme. He's been with the same coordinator his whole career. Like all those things together, I could see Oklahoma. But anyway, those are some of the teams that I think are going to be in the playoff that Notre Dame would have to compete with, and they pretty much all have experienced quarterbacks. Let's check out the chat. Katie, Notre Dame is definitely a contender. Any portal player needing further development will get it at Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a really good staff. They do have a really good staff. I think they finally found the right mix on defense, and I think that overall the offense, I mean, again, they were second in the country last year in yards per play. They were second in when CJ was behind center in yards per pass. Like they're in a good spot, no doubt about it. Bob Ackerman, thanks for all the great content, Brian. Go Irish. Thank you, sir. Truly appreciate it. James Gibbs, hey, Brian, great content. Thank you, sir. Katie Allman, CJ Carr having a season under his belt is huge. That may be a factor that puts Notre Dame over the top. Experience doesn't hurt. Certainly not at quarterback. I'll grant you. D-line rotational depth is key, says Katie. Teams like Indiana that keep defenses on the field proved you have to be too deep in your D-line rotation. 100%. 100%. Teams that don't have depth at D-line in the back half of their schedule almost always get plowed. How many times have we seen, let me give you a scenario where there's a team in the Big Ten that's doing pretty well, maybe a little surprising. In like game 8, 9, they'll play a team that's just physical and they're sound, and you know they can run the ball. Wisconsin, an Iowa, a Minnesota, somebody like that. It's not top tier overall talent, but here we come. We're going to run downhill, and they get smashed. That's the problem, and that's why Katie's point is absolutely correct. Katie, again, this is a pretty good one here. Early Vegas odds only gives Miami the 13th best chance of returning to the playoff. They know Mario. That is wild to me. I'm just curious, Katie. You say Vegas odds. Are you talking about FanDuel or are you talking about another? I'm just curious which one that is. That seems really low to me. Then again, I do have to take one other thing into account. I only talk about, for this scenario, the Power 4 teams. One or two teams from the G6 level might be ahead. I don't look at their schedules, but I'm just curious which one you think it is. Katie, UGA is my lock. Also, Katie, I haven't really looked at Georgia's schedule. Is it quote unquote lesser for this next year? They're changing schedules around this year in the Southeastern Conference. So maybe they got one of the easier ones. James Gibbs, I think Notre Dame run game will be top notch. I think it will be. They've got really talented guys, especially Charles Jagusa ends up being healthy. I don't care if he plays guard. I don't care if he plays tackle. He's just a really good football player. Let's see how that goes. I think they will have a top 10 run game because teams are going to fear CJ throwing the ball over their head, especially if one or both of Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter hit. Will that happen? I don't know for sure, but I'd say both of them are certainly talented enough to make a dent. And again, I'm not going to dive into Notre Dame's receiver depth chart. For fans that are ND watching this, their depth chart, if you go look at it and look up their players across the board, a lot of really talented guys. And now they got some youngsters that are trying to push for a starting job or getting playing time. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, there's a long way to go for Notre Dame's run game between now and just the end of spring because there's just no way to say this. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. How do you replace that? That's crazy. And I know that, again, they got super talented players, but that is really, really hard. Last thoughts here for me before I wrap up the show. Notre Dame, I think, conservatively is a top 10 team by pretty much any measurement. And in my opinion, pretty much a top 5 team. I've got them number 2 early on. I want to see who makes it through spring healthy. But if Notre Dame, against what is a pretty sad schedule, they got to play BYU on the road. They got SMU and Miami at home. Those are the 3 most difficult teams they will play in terms of a absolute roster they're looking at. I think they should go undefeated. And part of that is schedule. Part of it is talent. Part of it is experienced quarterback. Part of it is O-line recruiting. Again, the Irish did not take a transfer portal offensive lineman. How many teams can say that? That is incredible. But anyway, to make a long story short, Notre Dame is in a spot where they should be pretty good across the board. And they don't have a specific hole. I think the portal, I would give them an A- overall. They could have taken a tight end. Like, that's being really picky. But otherwise, Notre Dame should be one of the most dominant teams in college football this next year, and matching that with their schedule, it's kind of hard to pick them not to win at least 10 games. They'll be in the playoff, and they'll probably be a team that, again, top handful of teams, yards per play, points per game, sacks, like really key stats like that, points per game allowed. I expect Notre Dame to be top 20 in just about every major metric. And if they intercept the football like they did last year, they were number 1 or number 2 with interceptions. They could be number 1 in the country in scoring defense. Who knows? But anyway, Notre Dame is loaded for this next year. And thank you for stopping in to check out the Portal Podcast. If you have not already, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're on Apple, please leave a 5-star review. You can get the Portal Podcast anywhere you get your pods: Spotify, Apple, Podbean, Amazon Music, of course, Apple, YouTube. Anywhere you get them, we've got you covered. And make sure you check out the Everydayer Club. The description is down below in the link. This has been the Portal Podcast.